magic carpet ride, a whole new world, a new fantastic point of view. No one to tell us no or where to go, or say we're only dreaming. A whole new world, a dazzling place I never knew. Like when I'm way up here, it's crystal clear that now I'm in a whole new world with you. Unbelievable sights, indescribable feeling, soaring, tumbling, reeling through an endless guiding sky. A whole new world, 100,000 things begin. I'm like a shooting star, I've come so far, I can't back on it. A whole new world, with new horizons to pursue. I'll chase anywhere, there's time to spare. Let me share this whole new world with you.
Hope that's not that advertisement.
It is.
Good morning.
Yeah.
Well, we finally were able to make our prelude recording work correctly, I think. Maybe third time's a charm. So good morning. Our words of welcome are from Kathy Romano Griffin. Come, let us enter this space of hope and community. Come, let us enter this space with our sorrows, our joys, our passion and compassion. Come, let us enter this space with the stories of our ancestors, for their strength and wisdom beats in our hearts. Come into this space, present to the beloved companions who move around us. Come into this space, mindful that we are together, we are building a future for other generations. Come into this virtual space and let us worship. And I offer a special welcome to you if you are newly with us this morning. We are honored by your curiosity and presence, and we invite you to stay after for discussion. For today's service, we have Robert Barnett presenting with me, Kat Barnett and Charlie Jacobs assisting technically, Michael Reason on piano and participating remotely, Linda Jessen singing, also Trudy Crippen, Richard Clark, and Colleen Beery providing remote tech support. I may have missed somebody in this growing crowd. Yes, Lou Crippen is here also helping with kind of making sure that we actually see your chat messages and respond to them. So I just want to welcome you with live from Fellowship Hall. It's our LCUUF Sunday service. Okay, a few moments this continuing education, if you will, on Zoom. And we've had a little bit of a discussion, a little bit of, you might even say, a lightweight conflict about whether people should have their cameras on or not during service. Some people find that distracting, and other people quite enjoy seeing other people singing, paying attention, maybe eating, maybe reading a book or whatever they're doing. And this is one case where we can have it both ways. If you want to have your video on, turn it on. We'll see you, whatever. But if you don't want that distraction, here's what to do. What you want to do is first switch from gallery view to presenter view so that you have just my image as the main image up there. And that's that little grid button that's, I think, either in the upper right or the lower left, depending on what kind of device you have. Then click on my face. Yeah, just click it, and that'll make your screen go to full screen view. And all the folks that are in gallery view will move over to the right side, and they will be in like a little rectangle full of pictures. Go to that. Look at the top. There's several little rectangles. Pick the smallest rectangle, the one to the left. click that, and it'll make all those disappear, and all that will be left is a little name tag that shows who's speaking. And you can even push that out of the way if you want. So that's a way to just get to the presenter view without any distractions. The other thing is announcements. We've projected the announcements in a slideshow before the service, but if you didn't get that, not to worry. Tomorrow I will publish a link to our announcements in our sharing. And now it is time to light our chalice.
Our chalice lighting words are by Lily Bolado from the International Council of Unitarian Universalists and Unitarians. Encendemos esta llama que representa la luz de verdad, el calor de amor y la energía de la acción. We light this flame that represents the light of truth, the worth of love, and the energy of action.
Each week, we take time to remind ourselves. Okay, video. All right. Good morning, everybody. Each week, we take time to remind ourselves that we belong to a community that cares for each other. We do this by sharing any significant joys or sorrows in our lives. If you have a joy or sorrow today, you can also type it in the chat box and we'll read it aloud, but type it soon because this will be over soon. First, let us voice our sorrows and concerns. Whatever you or the world may be holding that is in need of our healing and caring thoughts, please type them into the box as appropriate. Oh, okay, Colleen says, both my sister Natasha and her husband Sandy are sick and being tested for COVID-19. All right, hope for the best, Colleen. For joys, let us recall our joys now. Whatever you may be celebrating, whatever evokes a feeling of joy or peace for yourself or others, please type them into the chat box. We already have one joy from Kathy Coaches, who says, Bob has had his second successful cataract surgery, and we are done. We'll fly home on August 7th. Hooray. And it looks like we have nothing more in the chat box coming. Now we're going to talk about our care candle. This care candle from our care team represents those sorrows that are too raw, too difficult for us to share aloud. So many of us have had losses, partners, children, grandchildren, losses that remain present with us every day. We'll light this candle for all of those unspoken sorrows.
Good morning, everybody. This reading is by Rachel Naomi Raman from her book, Kitchen Table Wisdom. For more than 20 years, I have offered a very simple yet powerful ritual to people before the radiation, chemotherapy, or surgery. I suggest they meet together with some of their closest friends and family the day before their procedure. It does not matter how large or small the group is, but it is important that it be made up of those who are connected to them to a bond of the heart. Before this meeting, I suggest they find an ordinary stone, a piece of the earth, big enough to fit in the palm of their hand, and bring it to the meeting with them. The ritual begins by having everyone sit in a circle in any order that they wish to speak. Each person tells the story of a time when they too faced a crisis. People may talk about the death of an important person, the loss of jobs or relationships, or even about their own illness. The person who is speaking holds the stone the patient has brought. When they finish telling their story of survival, they take a moment to reflect on the personal quality that they feel helped them come through that difficult time. People will say such things as, what got me through was determination, or what got me through was faith, or what got me through was humor. When they have named the quality of their strength, they speak directly to the person preparing for surgery or treatment, saying, I put determination into this stone for you, or I put faith into this stone for you. Often, what people say is surprising. Sometimes they tell of crises that occurred when they were young or in wartime that others, even their family members, may not have known before, or they attribute their survival to qualities that are ordinarily not seen as strengths. It is usually a moving and intimate meeting, and often all the people who participate say that they feel strengthened and inspired by it. After everyone has spoken, the stone is given back to the patient who takes it with them to the hospital to keep nearby and hold in their hand when things get hard. I have had several patients go to their chemotherapy, radiation, or even their surgery with their stones strapped with adhesive tape to the palm of one of their hands or the bottom of their feet. Over the years, many of the oncologists and surgeons in our community have learned about these stones from their patients and are very careful about them. One surgeon even had the staff go through the hospital laundry in search of a stone that was accidentally thrown away with the sheets in the recovery room. I asked him why he had done this, and he laughed and said, listen, I have seen people do badly after surgery and even die when there was no reason for it other than the fact that they believed that they would not make it. I need all the help that I can get. Actually, no one has chemotherapy or radiation or goes into an operating room without the thoughts, hopes, and prayers of many people going with them. The stone seems to make that a little more clear to people and to remind them of the strength and beauty of what is natural in an environment which is highly technical and sterile. It connects them to the earth. Ritual is one of the oldest ways to mobilize the power of community for healing. It makes the caring of the community visible, tangible, and real.
Let's take a little time now for meditation. One of the goals of meditation, one of the many goals, is to increase our powers of concentration. And oftentimes people will meditate on an object, focus their attention on some physical object, some ordinary thing. here I have the stone. This is going to be my object of meditation. You might have something handy that you might direct your attention to. And I invite you to just, as we take a couple minutes for meditation, just to look at the object you have. No need to analyze it, think about where it came from, all that sort of stuff. Just observe the object. Notice the color, notice the texture. I oftentimes find that it's very powerful to notice the edge of the object, the boundary. Is it smooth? Is it jaggy, fuzzy, soft? Is the color reflective? Just notice those kinds of things. And if your mind wanders, just bring it back to your object. So we'll just take a little time here and observe whatever you happen to have handy as an object of focus, of concentration. Let us now return to this time and this place to be together.
Possessions that your character treasures, and how those special objects can give emotional impact to your story. The word endowed simply means something that has great value, meaning, or purpose. Any object that has special significance to your character can be an endowed object. Maybe it's a key or a photograph. Maybe it's a cozy house, or maybe it's a bloodstained soccer ball. Its value doesn't come from how expensive the object is or what it can do. The value comes from the emotional connection your character has to the object. It is a treasure because of what it means to your character. For King Arthur, Excalibur isn't an endowed object because it's a powerful weapon or because it's a bejeweled sword. It's an endowed object because it represents for Arthur that he and he alone is the rightful king of England. Excalibur shows Arthur's legitimacy as a ruler. Having that specific sword reminds him of his duty as a good king. There are many nice examples of endowed objects in Lord of the Rings. The One Ring, of course. Also, Aragorn's reforged sword, Anduril, and Boromir's Horn of Gondor that gets broken in two when he dies. But my favorite is the simple box of salt that Samwise Gamgee brings with him on his journey with Frodo to destroy the ring. That little box of salt is an important reminder of the home they've left behind. Salt enhances flavor for food, which adds a layer of symbolism that Sam and Frodo don't want to lose the appreciation of the simple pleasures on their terrible quest. At one point, Sam drops the box of salt as they are ascending a steep mountain on the way to Mordor, but Frodo catches it, a close call, and a sign that Frodo and Sam are struggling to hold on to that hope of home back in the Shire. It's as if they lose the salt, they would lose the Shire. Tolkien nicely returns to that box of Shire salt throughout the story. It's a minor thing, but it has major psychological impact on the reader. In a way, endowed objects are like talismans. In many legends and myths, the hero receives a magical talisman, often a necklace or a weapon that gives them protection. Think of the endowed object as something that gives your character emotional protection rather than magical protection. Or they can be like a cursed object, something that represents your character's fears. Think of Captain Hook and his watch. That watch is an endowed object, even though Hook doesn't have it anymore. The watch now lies in the belly of a crocodile who bit Hook's hand off. This crocodile has had a taste for Hook and wants to eat him. But Hook is always warned of the crocodile's approach by the ticking clock. A ticking clock is a common symbol of death. Time runs out for all of us. Hook is afraid of that crocodile, but also of his mortality. The ticking watch in the crocodile's belly works wonderfully as this sort of negative endowed object. Ultimately, an endowed object can be anything, as long as it's deeply meaningful to your character. Dice, a pocket knife, a photograph with a message written on the back, a perfect shell, a broken shell. What's nice about a simple object is that it gets readers wondering why your character cares so much about that plain old cufflink or seashell. The eventual reveal of the backstory can illuminate your character's motivations and emotions in a wonderful and surprising way. It can give readers that moment of going, ah, that's why she carries that everywhere she goes.
So that was a clip from a writing lesson by author and writing coach John Claude Bemis, who talks about endowed objects. So this is the first and really the only batik piece I've ever done. This is kind of a table runner that I made at Star Island, which is a UU camp in New Hampshire. Now, this particular retreat I went to was for ministers in the early years of their ministry. There we dealt with deep stuff, our struggles in ministry with things like congregational conflict. We worked on these things through writing, through reflection, through psychodrama, intense dialogue. There were some tears, some raised voices. But I also got the chance to do fun stuff like photography and learning how to create batik. So this simple piece became a reminder of my early days in ministry. And now there's another thing I want to remember about this retreat. It ended a day early. A hurricane threatened the island. We helped board up the windows, and then we left on an early boat. Our short video spoke of endowed objects in literature and film. Bemis listed numerous examples. I'm sure you can think of a few. Endowed objects are all over. Consider fairy tales, for example. Cinderella with her glass slipper that as an endowed object that connects her as a servant girl in rags to the enchanting and mysterious woman at the ball. Or consider in movies The Wizard of Oz with Dorothy and her ruby slippers, which were given to her by the Good Witch. They were both beneficial and they also lead to trouble, but ultimately they lead to no place like home. Or consider what some people think is the greatest movie ever made, Citizen Kane. At the beginning of the film, Kane, on his deathbed, utters the word Rosebud. We learn at the end of the film, only after all this exploration in the whole film, that the Rosebud is the trade name of the sled that belonged to the 8-year-old Cain. Rosebud connected Cain to the childhood innocence and happiness that was snatched from him as he was put on a trajectory towards wealth and power. Now, of course, our lives are not stories that are being spun out by some omnipotent author or movie maker somewhere. At least we hope. At least we hope we're not living in a personal version of the Truman Show. Still, there may be objects that we have found or been given or made that have special meaning. That boutique table runner, which often gets lost among my other things at times and disappears and then turns up, it reminds me of challenging times in ministry. And it's around now. It's hanging in my living room, actually over my television set, as we deal with this pandemic. So it's kind of an endowed object. It's an object that has special meaning for me. Do you have any endowed objects in your lives? What meaning do you attach to those objects? We'll now have a time where we can talk about endowed objects in our lives. We'll start with small group breakouts. Those of you who have endowed objects that you want to share will have a chance to talk about them. We'll only have about 7 minutes in breakout, so each person shouldn't take more than a minute or so. And I encourage you to be respectful of time so everyone can share. And some of you who don't have objects might still have stories to share about objects with your fellow congregants. And if you prefer, you can simply listen to the stories of others. Or if you like, you can click leave and return to the main room until we're done with this sharing. So we'll go into sharing now. So I hope you had an enjoyable time sharing stories about endowed objects in your lives. I'd love to hear from a few of you very briefly about your endowed objects. Please raise your hand in Zoom, not in real, no. What you want to do is to go to participants and click on that, and then click raise hand, which should be in the lower left corner. Our greeters will try to pick a few of you to share, and we'll ask you to unmute and turn on video. Please show us your object and just give us a few sentences about why it's important to you.
Hello.
Hopefully Colleen will be taking care of that.
Do you want us to talk?
I've been invited to speak. Oh, good. Okay. Sorry, go ahead.
You want us to talk?
Looks like Dee Dee is on the main screen. So Dee Dee, if you'd like to go.
Sure. I was not able to get into the breakout room at all, so Larry and I just sat here and waited. But my shared object, both Larry and I have endowed objects. Mine was a photo that was taken of me in the back of my first convertible back in Boston many years ago. And the subtitle is called Laughing All the Way. It was the photo that I put on my profile when I met Larry on one of the internet sites. And so it's always been very, very special to me, and I have a copy of it both here and in Mexico. And so when people asked about endowed objects, it was the first thing I grabbed.
And it was very intriguing because I couldn't quite see.
Yeah, Larry couldn't see my face. So it was very special. It is very special.
Thank you, Dee Dee. I'm going to move on to Joni.
Joni?
Okay. This is one of many large chunks of amethyst that my son and I mined up near, up in Canada when he was about 4 years old. And it reminds me of fabulous times camping with him and pickaxing our own amethyst. And I had a bag of about 10 of these that I've moved all over the world and kept with me. I have about 4 of them left now. I've given them away. But amethyst is a very powerful stone. I'm very attached. I have a collection of stones. But this came to mind immediately when you talked about an endowed object. And it's heavy. I moved a lot of weight.
Thanks, Joni.
Thanks, Joni. Let's move on to Liz.
Morning. I have a tiny little medal of St. Joseph that was in my father's wallet when he died. My father was not Catholic, and so this is a very interesting object to find in his wallet. But St. Joseph is the patron saint of fatherhood, and I suspect that my grandfather gave it to him, and so
Patron saint of fatherhood.
I keep it. Yep.
Thank you. Let's move to John Wall.
I'm muted, I believe.
No,
Yeah, you're good.
You're good.
Okay. Well, I don't have an object, but Diane has.
Oh, well, I just hold them up. I don't think I completely understood the topic. But this is my great grandmother's watch, and I brought something else too. Now, I have fun with this because a lot of people don't know what it is. Okay, I'll just say what it is. This is a holder for your hat pins. And this was my grandmother's. So I kind of liked having the two of them together to think about women in the past. So it's kind of nice to look at them and think, you know, how are their lives? So that's all.
Thank you.
Thank you all. That was very illuminating. That's kind of an introduction to many of you. We know you better now. As I was thinking about endowed objects, I realized that many religious objects are in fact endowed objects, just of a different kind. Oftentimes they are ordinary objects that take on special meaning in various religions. Consider, for example, the Christian cross. The cross was originally merely a symbol of state execution. It came to take on a different meaning in Christianity, that of resurrection, of life overcoming death, of the path to heaven for believers. Or consider in Judaism, the Torah. It's the sacred book of Judaism, true, but it carries other meanings also. Our Lake Chapala Jewish congregation is not far from us here. And in fact, we have a good relationship with them going back some years. But they were gifted a Torah from another synagogue in Maryland last year. And that synagogue itself was gifted a Torah from a synagogue which had been destroyed by the Nazis. The picture here is from their celebration last year. The new Torah under the tent, the huppah, is being carried to the congregational building, accompanied by klezmer music and dancing horses. This is Mexico, after all. So the Torah can represent not only the book, the teaching, but also interconnection, a connection with history. It's a powerful image. Or consider the UU chalice. The chalice was originally designed simply as a logo for a letterhead. The logo was used by Unitarians to help Jews and others escape Nazi-occupied lands. Now the chalice has become an actual thing, a ritual object that is lit by most of our congregations at the start of their services. So our chalice, in addition to indicating the start of sacred time, is endowed with meanings of resistance and compassion for oppressed people everywhere. As Bima said in the video, some objects can be perceived as cursed or at least negative. I recall years ago, I went to a UU leadership retreat as a lay leader in my church. The retreat was at a Catholic retreat center, well, because these retreat centers were readily available and they were cheap to rent. In my sleeping room was a crucifix on the wall. I took it down and put it in the drawer before I went to bed. My connection with Christianity was fraught then, and that endowed object, important to Catholics, had a different effect on me. I had, as some would call it, cross cringe. I'd like to think I've come to a different place, that I've made a certain peace with my own Christian background, even though I haven't returned to that faith. But now, at least, crosses and retreat centers don't bother me anymore. Sometimes the endowed objects from other religions can have unexpected emotional power. When I served a UU church in Youngstown, we had a Tibetan Buddhist group that rented space from us. I sometimes attended their meditations. Now, they had arranged that the Maitreya Relic Tour come to Youngstown. Now, this tour was a display of relics from ancient Tibetan Buddhist teachers, including apparently the Buddha himself. It was a big deal for this group. I went to the tour. There was all of these objects, beautiful things all over, and I had a chance to receive a blessing from one of the orange-robed monks that traveled with these relics. The monk held a small container over my head, a container which he said contained the relics, the remains of one of the great teachers in the Tibetan Buddhist lineage. This monk said some kind of blessing over me in a strange tongue. And as I closed my eyes, I had an amazing experience. I saw the universe full of galaxies, full of worlds without end, with Buddhas everywhere, a multiplicity of Buddhas, a sense of expansiveness, of vastness, of abundance. So even as a person that didn't believe in these relics, I was affected by them. It was unexpected, surprising. And this brings us to our reading. Rachel Naomi Raymond created a ritual that endows an object, a simple stone, with power. She encouraged a patient facing a difficult surgery or treatment to assemble a gathering of supportive people. She invited the people to express what helped them get through difficult times and to name those qualities. These family and friends ritually put the good qualities into this stone, this tangible object which was given back to the patient. Whether the stone, the ritual object, is truly endowed with these qualities doesn't matter. It's how the stone helps the patient get through. That's all that matters. The stone connects the patient with their support network, their community. As Raymond says, ritual is one of the oldest ways to mobilize the power of community for healing. It makes the caring of the community visible, tangible, real. And so may we pay attention to the power of endowed objects in our lives. May we notice where these endowed objects appear in our own stories and be ready to share those stories with those around us that we love. Our hymn is Come Sing a Song With Me, which will be sung by Linda Jessen with Michael Reason on piano. Now, Come Sing a Song With Me is by UU songwriter Carolyn McDade. I'm sure you'll pick up the potentially endowed object in the lyrics.
Come sing a song with me. Come sing a song with me. Come sing a song with me, that I might know your mind. And I'll bring you home when hope is hard to find. And I'll bring a song of love that grows in the winter time. Come dream a dream with me. Come dream a dream with me. Come dream a dream with me, that I might know you're mine. And I'll bring you home when hope is hard to find. And I'll bring a song of love and a rose in the winter time. Come walk in rain with me. Come walk in rain with me. Come walk in rain with me, that I might know you're mine. And I'll bring you home when hope is hard to find. And I'll bring a song of love and a rose in the winter time. Come share a rose with me. Come share a rose with me. Come share a rose with me, that I might know you're mine. And I'll bring you home when hope is hard to find. And I'll bring a song of love and a rose in the winter time.
Let us extinguish our chalices with these words, which we read together. We extinguish this flame, but not the light of truth, the warmth of community, or the fire of commitment. These we keep in our hearts and share with all the world.
Now for our postlude. Michael? just as in film or fiction where we find endowed objects, as we recognize such sacred objects in our own lives, may we learn to see the meaning in things around us, and may this meaning carry us to deeper understanding of the stories of our own lives and those around us. Blessed be. And as we close, let us do a ritual of holding hands. I invite you to turn your camera on and then select gallery view so you can see a lot of people. Then put your hands up like this and try to touch the box that you're kind of in right now. It's kind of hard because it's backwards. So touching the edge of your image box, and let's say these words together. Just repeat after me. I put my hand in yours.
I put my hand in yours.
So that together we may do.
So that together we may heal.
What we cannot do alone.
What we cannot do alone.
Go in peace. And now we have time for discussion if you'd like to stay around. We'll start with small groups, and you can turn on your camera if you've already done that and unmute yourselves. If you want to leave a group, you can click leave and you'll come back to the main room where we can continue discussion there or ask to go to another room. And here are some possible questions to consider. If you have personal endowed objects in your life, how do they influence you, remind you of your history, of values, or a sense of purpose? Who else, family, friends, knows the stories behind your objects? Or this, what religious endowed objects influence you, positively or negatively? See you in groups.
This is Colleen. I'm going to move you into groups in just a moment, just giving a few people time to leave so I can resort.